So hi, we're from Alpha Omega London, maker of shoes at heart but creator of waves in the fashion industry. We started this podcast series to tackle head-on the current issues that matter in the society we live in today and get honest views from the mouths that matter. So in this series, we're discussing how fashion over the years has frolicked with its association with revolutionary causes and social injustices, revolutionising both the industry and the way we view gender in a post-industrialised world. So, tackling this discussion, this series, is Tamara,
Nazina,
Priyanka,
Kate.
Okay, so welcome and thank you for tuning in to the final episode of this series. This next episode is going to be primarily about looking at whether agender fashion as a trend is pretty much the solution to creating a world that's a little bit more progressive and gender equal, or if that's pretty much what fashion intends. Is it, it's establishing whether that's its purpose, whether it is trying to solve that conundrum.
I don't know, the way that I see it is that it's almost just trying to be like a plaster, and it's kind of like a one size fits all, and it's like, okay, well, we're having a little bit of a crisis right now. Some people there's two kind of ends of the spectrum. It's like some people don't associate with either male or female, or the people that do associate with male and female, they don't like the bad connotation. Agender, to me, agender is very masculine.
Yeah,
it's a woman that is toning down on femininity.
Absolutely.
And a guy can, I just don't. I feel like a guy would still wear the same thing.
Yeah.
If you were in, I don't know, when Selfridges did that agender kind
Pop-up.
of floor.
Yes.
If you were in there, a guy could pick up anything and he would be like, cool,
Still
this is
look like
what
a guy.
I'd wear.
Yeah.
Still look
Yeah.
like a guy. But a girl would pick it up and
Maybe look like a pubescent boy.
yeah, exactly. And she'll look like a pubescent boy because she's wearing a baggy t-shirt that hides that she has boobs, and she's wearing some like shapeless trousers, and the t-shirt's coming over her bum so you can't see that she has a figure, and she's wearing trainers like Stan Smiths or something, whatever. Like,
do you know what? To a degree, I get where I get the premise. The premise is about, kind of trying to not be perceived purely by your gender identity and having that mask, because I think, really we shouldn't be defined by our gender identities, as we've discussed before. However, we should feel empowered. You can't, I believe you should feel empowered by who you are individually. And, I don't necessarily feel as though gender identities should define who you are. And then I think the way fashion kind of plays into that should be to encourage that empowerment. And I feel as though this sort of agender concept is, it's a little bit, it's almost counterproductive for gender binary sexes. And I don't know necessarily whether it's going to be productive for communities who don't necessarily subscribe to, who are transgender or who subscribe to other gender identities. I don't know how much this is really going to, create such an impact on their lives and how they feel integrated into, into acceptance.
I just feel it strips away identity more than anything.
Yeah.
I just think it's very,
but I guess for some,
faceless.
That's the issue. It's being categorized in one box or the other. So maybe
but does that really
away...
empower you? Does that really give someone empowerment to kind of, like we've said before, and we've mentioned over the past few episodes, it kind of makes you just blend into the crowd. It's not very outstanding. It's not very, raucous. It's pretty bland. And does that really, I don't know. I mean, because personally I don't subscribe to that myself, and I genuinely don't know the answer to this, but is it actually very empowering to kind of not be associated to essentially anything, to be almost like a blank canvas?
Is that just because the industry's answer to it has been so dull?
Yeah.
Really, if they have, because because they haven't really come up with, they've just stuck a label on a big t-shirt and not really come up with anything terribly innovative or anything, to show that actually agender fashion could be so much more. There is so much more to it and so many ways you could go with it, but they haven't really bothered.
I think the industry hasn't been able to successfully incorporate agender styles seamlessly. Like it's highlighting it in ways we wouldn't want to see it. I was actually going through a lot of fashion blogs, like a lot of queer fashion blogs, and the kind of styles they come up with, the way they mix and match things. There's laces with leather, there's very bold prints, but the way they do it. It just looks fantastic. So I think we spoke about trickle-down theory in the last week, I think. So if if brands started to take up the trickle-up theory, if they started to look at street styles and kind of incorporate those, I think it would do wonders.
But I think it's worrying, though, because if they do incorporate the trickle-up theory, are they really doing it for any social cause, or are they doing it because they see people want that, and like we've mentioned again before, it's for profitability, it's so they can get a return on investment? And I know it's a very dark and pessimistic way of looking at things, but I think at the end of the day, the fashion industry, in my view, fashion industry, it's an industry, it's a business, and what do businesses do? They make money. And I think that they can hijack on what people want, but are they really doing it for a good cause? Are they just doing it because they think, this seems profitable right now?
Well, they also want to remain relevant and be seen to be progressive, or at least championing.
But I know
causes.
we've mentioned, with the Selfridges, and it was a pop-up. That's the thing we're saying, and how invested in a cause can you really, or are you really, if it's something temporary? And then they'll move on to something else the next week.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think also it wants to, as I said before, it just wants to, create this sort of outsider looking in type of scenario where we briefly take a glimpse of this exotic, community, and we take from that, this whole new concept that we can repackage. As a concept that has existed in the past before, and maybe attach a bit of a social message to it, given that there are so many buzzwords about gender inequality in other, sort of spheres of society at the moment.
I think that's the thing, though. It would be much more worthwhile to stick with it, to invest time in getting people used to the idea, getting your average shopper used to a different shopping concept, keeping these ranges in store easily available among all the other ranges, so it's not, that would be much more progressive to my mind, to introduce this as the new normal. Whatever gender you subscribe to, you can go into a store and products are accessible to you, available to you. The shopping environment is one that you feel comfortable in, and you can just go and do an everyday activity and enjoy it the same way other people do who are already catered for. That would be where they made the difference for me, which is what I would like to see them do, rather than we just have a pop-up shop or a pop-up trend or
I think maybe we're missing kind of a really important question, though, is that despite how invested they are into it, I mean, at the end of the day, is it still just kind of forcing a female into a male aesthetic? I mean, what do we think? What do people think about agender? Like, when you look at it, what does it look like
in its current
men's
guise?
Fashion?
Yes, I think so. And I think for high street fashion, most definitely, because it's the easiest way of doing it with making very little effort, and you can just remarket it as something else. I mean, the question comes, if people are going to invest in this, that they need to, I'm sure there's other designers out there doing much more innovative things and probably been doing them for a while, but get no sort of credit for it or anything like that. But those ideas would be interesting.
I always want to try and understand why androgyny, which it is really, it's been sort of incorporated into some form in my own personal styling, but I've always wondered why it really is so progressive, and anything feminine is seen way too whimsical and non-progressive
and traditional and old-fashioned.
I don't understand where we've
Yeah, I think that's the thing as well.
particularly within this industry. So when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, you know, with its attachments to social issues such as gender inequalities, you know, the reflection is not looking good at the moment.
Well, I also think, you know, we've had many generations of them only supplying to two genders, and you haven't really been able to get that right. Now you've introduced another way, and you're still not getting it right.
Because I remember
problem.
seeing in a John Lewis ad for their children's wear
Yeah,
and
the
like
remote.
their agender. But when I was looking at it, I was like, all you've done is just made boys' clothes and then just modelled a girl in them.
Yeah.
Like, what was it? They had like leggings with like dinosaurs on, and then a navy blue top with red crocodiles on, and like the boy was wearing the same outfit as the girl. And I was like, essentially, you've put a girl in a boy's outfit, and then you've just advertised it as an agender range. Like,
Right.
it's not.
Right.
You're just...
It's a branding opportunity, I must
Yeah.
admit. And it works on the psychology as well, because, you know, maybe the upside is that it forces parents to really kind of, you know, acknowledge that there are these very restrictive roles that we do impose on our children, and it starts at that buying stage of clothing for our children. It's trying to maybe bring awareness to this whole issue, but then again, it's almost like it's pointing the finger at gender roles.
Just a quick reminder, you're listening to the AO London podcast. Please subscribe on whatever platform you listen on, give us a review, and carry on the protest. Enjoy the rest of the podcast. I mean, I guess it comes, like, full circle, I suppose, back to what we discussed in episode 1, and it's the idea that gender roles, they're formed from conception.
Yeah.
They're formed from the moment that you are a gender. You know, as soon as you find out if you're a girl or a boy, you're therefore, you know, put into that camp, like, I suppose.
I think it's just self-expression. I really do.
Yeah.
There should be, you know, creating another box, you know, to tick is just it's just counterintuitive for me. Just everyone needs to just express themselves in whichever way they feel, you know, best suits them. They need to first establish who they are, and not really look towards fashion in trying to navigate through that. Because I think, you know...
But I think for so many people, and especially, you know, like transgender, fashion's that escape. That's their release, and that's their way of expressing who they are, and that's their way of being a boy but wanting to be a girl. And that's the only way they can do it.
Vice versa.
Yeah, exactly, or vice versa.
Yeah, I think that I saw this shirt from Burberry. It was maroon colored, and it was completely of lace. It was made of lace, and it was half sleeved. And in the photograph, a man was wearing it, and I was like, I could wear this too. Like, this is too pretty. I could wear it too. And that's when I thought, okay, maybe if you don't market something as an agender style clothing, maybe it could. It could appeal to everybody. You know, say you have the same shirt, a man wears it and a female wears it too. The same shirt with no difference.
Well, isn't it like that's like the
But they're still
couples, isn't
quite-
it?
yeah,
You know, with the
yeah.
couples, and it's like they get couples, and you know, it's like it's that their whole premise is that you can share each other's clothes. You could essentially have the same wardrobe or a very similar one, and you know, you could share his jumper and he could wear your jeans. I mean, obviously, yeah, sizing
His and
issues,
hers.
but like,
Yeah. It's
but
the
it's
classic
essentially
his and hers.
yeah. But then again, is that just? I mean, is that then just accommodating people who subscribe to both of them and want to dabble? You know, someone who does subscribe to female and a guy who subscribes to male, and they just want to dabble in the two. Does that really help out people who genuinely don't understand either?
The funny thing with Laura's dissertation was that she's a student from who was studying psychology in fashion at MA level, and she identified that actually it's the process of buying clothing for transgender people or people within the LGBT community that they struggle with, you know, quite often. So having that ability to be able to, you know, be in an agender environment makes, you know, whatever negative emotional connotations that are associated, or the anxiety that's associated with buying clothes, it takes that away. But I just don't know how that fits in.
But does it take their personality away too? Does it take their identity away? Is it just kind of an easy escape?
Well, funny enough, that they're an incredibly fluid, you know, they're very fluid in how they represent themselves. So one day they may feel as though they want to maybe come across as a little bit more masculine, and other days a little bit more feminine. So, you know, maybe an agender concept wouldn't work in that respect, because, you know, they're still playing to gender roles, or gender role playing within the fashion expression. It's a very deep and complicated, you know, sort of issue to try and understand, and I don't think that there is this solution, because it's embedded so deep within the fabric of you know, society, and in our history, and in our many cultures, that, you know, it's really just the tip of the iceberg when we're looking at, you know, this as a trend. It really is. And what I'm scared of, it forms its purpose for designers, because I guess designers are able to do away with women's wear collections, do away with separate men's wear collections, and fuse the two together. But, you know, just doing it purely for, you know, making it a little bit more, you know, relaxed on the old profit margins, for me, is not really a good enough reason for a cause like this. And so what I'm quite interested in is, you know, looking at how we actually consciously make a world, you know, far better for everyone in whichever way, shape or form they express themselves in, and not feeling the fear of being judged, or not feeling the fear of not fitting in. So I guess what we are really trying to sort of discuss is that maybe there's an element of caution that we need to apply with agender fashion, because in some respects it kind of does reinstall the same values of male privilege, you know, where women are kind of forced to fit into this male aesthetic, but equally for communities that don't subscribe to gender binary identities, then, you know, that is a form of being able to feel accepted, at least, or it takes at least the stress away and the anxiety away from actually having to, you know, express themselves through fashion. But I guess the next question is, then, are we even willing to adapt to a agender fashion? You know, are we in a position where, you know, be something that will
I don't really think it's the fashion that we need to adapt to. I think it's the thinking behind it, and it's the thought process that fuels that. And I think that, you know, for as long as we live by those stereotypes and die by those stereotypes of boy and girl and other, the next, you know, the fashion wave is never going to happen. It will be a passing trend, and then it won't have impacted anything. And I think it's not the root of the issue. It's, for me, and again, a really pessimistic view, but I genuinely just think it's the fashion industry trying to profit on a very deep social issue, and a very current issue that a lot of people, you know, it affects a lot of people. But I just don't think that, you know, just having an agender range and every company having something that's not for boys or for girls, but it's technically a girl in boys' clothes, like it's not solving anything.
It does bring awareness, and I think that's the only takeaway point.
Yeah, it gives visibility.
Yeah.
To something that was invisible.
Exactly. It brings awareness, because there is a lot that goes on with people who struggle with gender identities.
Definitely.
And I think it's their struggle that I empathize with. Whether the fashion industry empathizes with those struggles, I doubt it, because they're going to be seen as exotic today and old news tomorrow. You know, there's going to be another trend or another subculture that the fashion industry will find interesting, that it can make itself more relevant, you know, through the exploitation of. So me personally, I empathize with those individuals, with those communities. However, whether I feel that this is something that can really make, you know, a societal change in the way gender roles and gender identities are pretty much you know, applied. Maybe, I don't know, maybe not.
I mean, you can't argue that it hasn't started a conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it does give a sort of an awareness to. It puts headlines in newspapers, and I don't think that's a bad thing. And I think it's potentially a very good thing. I know it hasn't. Some of the initiatives haven't always got a lot of good press, but at least if it's in the press, it's being talked about,
Right.
and those conversations become more audible in kind of terms of baby steps. Then I guess there are some positives to it. I just think because you know, everybody knows there's a monetary issue behind this, there's business interest behind this. It doesn't always feel authentic.
Yeah.
And I think that's a shame, because it is very important.
I guess very similar actually to awareness of mental health. It's baby steps, but the first step is awareness, and it's raising awareness that you know, like, mental health is a disease. You know, you can't see it, but it's a disease. And not being able to identify with either being male or female is a social issue, and it's not something that should be looked on as a profit measure, you know, and like a profit opportunity. And I guess as soon as there is a business interest, people get, you know, they get wary, and they start losing confidence and losing trust.
I think if they keep this business thinking aside for a while, and I do have faith in the industry, otherwise I think they have incredible power to kind of change perspectives. So maybe sooner or later it should happen.
Thanks so much for listening. Please let us know your thoughts and carry on the discussion on social media at @alpha_omega_London. Please subscribe on whichever platform you listen on, and leave us a review to carry on the protest.